Hi everybody, welcome to Simplify Your Online Marketing. My name is Ahava Leibtag and I'm the president of Aha Media Group. We're a content strategy and content marketing consultancy located right outside of Washington, D.C. I have more than 18 years of experience in marketing and digital marketing. While I hate to admit it, it reveals my age, but it's a topic that I'm really excited about and that I've worked in for a long time and seen grown and changed tremendously even over the last 3 years. I know that many of you, particularly if you're entrepreneurs, feel really incredibly overwhelmed by the amount of information that's out there about online marketing, web marketing, digital marketing. And so the point of today's presentation isn't to cover everything that you could possibly know about it, but really just to simplify some of the common thoughts and misconceptions that a lot of people have about what the goals of online marketing should be. And then to talk about some tools and practical things that you can bring back to your offices immediately and start planning and using them to make your online marketing as great as it can be. So let's begin and talk a little bit about this complex and varied topic. So we know that YouTube users upload 48 hours of video every single minute. So this is every 60 seconds this is happening. Facebook users are sharing 684,000 pieces of content. Instagram users share 3,600 new photos, and Tumblr sees 27,000 new posts published, almost 28,000, every 60 seconds across the world. The Altimeter Group published this statistic in 2013. The average brand organization is responsible for the content demands of 178 social media properties, plus websites, blogs, and live events. Now, when I read this, I couldn't even believe it because I didn't even know there were 178 social media properties. And then this statistic gets bandied around very commonly in marketing circles that Americans are bombarded by 5,000 messages a day. So I was really curious about where this comes from, and I looked for it, and I found out that it was originally quoted in a New York Times article in 1988. So if Americans were bombarded by 5,000 messages a day in 1988, can you imagine how many they're bombarded by now? It has to be at least double or triple. Now, this is even more fascinating because not only have things changed, but they've changed so drastically in such a short amount of time. To build an audience of 50 million people, radio technology took 58 years. So in order to get to 50 million radio listeners, it took 58 years. In order to get to the same audience for television, it took 14 years. The World Wide Web took 4 years to get to 50 million people. Facebook took 3.6 years, and the iPad took 80 days. So in 80 days, the iPad had an audience of 50 million people, whereas it took radio technology 58 years. So it's enough to really make anybody want to pull their hair out in distress. How are you, as an entrepreneur or as somebody who's really responsible for online marketing at your organization, supposed to put ideas in place and strategic plans that are going to allow you to grow audiences and let people know about your products and services while everything is changing so rapidly and there's just so much to do and so much to plan, and who knows what's going to happen next because of the rapid changing of technology and just the way that audiences are moving so quickly. So today we're going to sort of simplify a lot of these ideas. I think a lot of the confusion comes from this idea that what we're doing out here is new, but it's really what we've been doing, since we invented marketing, which was, believe it or not, thousands of years ago when we first started branding and selling in marketplaces. We're also going to talk about ways that you can create content to drive audiences towards your products and services, and we're also going to talk about how to establish internal workflow for creating and managing content, because a lot of times what gets organizations stuck is not that they don't have great stories to tell or not that they don't have great ideas, but they don't have clear workflow in place for how to get those stories and ideas out to the audiences who are hungry to consume them. So let's talk about understanding the goals of online marketing, because I think that that's an important thing to understand. about what it is that we're trying to do here. And so let's start with the white picket fence. So I want you to imagine 30, 40, 50 years ago, when you were looking for a professional in your neighborhood, you went to your friends and your family across the white picket fence, so to speak, although it really could have been anywhere that you spent time with people that you knew. And you would say, you know, I need a dentist, I need a dance teacher for my daughter. What do you think of this particular school? What do you hear about this particular college? And that was how people got information. They spoke to other people. They had conversations in places that they spent time, and that they spent time with those people directly. And they would get advice from good friends from their trusted network. And this was how information was passed from person to person. But now the technology has evolved so rapidly that we really don't need to do that anymore. The whole point of all these devices that we all have now, the smartphones and the tablets and the computers and the web and social media, it's really allowed us not to have the physical formality of the white picket fence, but rather have conversations across all of these different devices. And so the goal for you as a marketer or as an entrepreneur is to understand that digital marketing allows you to create and sustain a conversation with these target audiences that you know might be interested in your products and services. And that's really, if you think about it at its most simple level, that's what you're trying to do. Instead of there being a white picket fence between you now, there's just all of these different channels that people can find you on, like Facebook, like Twitter, like the web, like a blog. And so when you think about it from that point of view, you realize that we're doing what we've always been doing. We're trying to get people to talk about us in a way that will make their friends and the people that they know also want to come and use us. And so let's talk about some of the goals of online marketing, and we're going to go through these carefully, and we're also going to use an example. So the first goal is that you want to attract people to your content, because if they read and like your content, they're going to share it with others on their social networks. And they're also probably going to talk about you in person with other people, not just talk about you on social media. Then you want to acquire something from them. And this is the really critical part of digital marketing. And this doesn't always happen, and you don't always have an opportunity for this, but it's one of the things that you should really strive to do, is to build an email list, to really get people's contact information in any way that you can. More sophisticated organizations do this through tracking and through using customer research management tools that work on the back end of their websites to track who's coming to see them, and then they can reach out to them. But a lot of organizations are simply just asking people for an email address in exchange for a piece of content. And they're also tweeting with them and talking to them on LinkedIn and talking to them on Facebook. And that also allows you to find avenues and ways to connect to your target audiences and the people that are interested in you. Then you want to engage and connect with these people and continue to engage and connect with them. And then you want to drive profitable action. So this is really the critical part of what online marketing is about, because if you're not somehow achieving return on investment, which is a financial term, that means that if you invest in spending time or money on developing relationships with people, hopefully what will happen is that they'll spend money or they'll give money to your organization. So you really want to make sure that you're tracking your efforts, and you're not just on social media and not just blogging because it's the thing to do, quote unquote, but it's really going to help grow your organization or grow your business in a way that's going to either add up to profit, or if you're in the not-for-profit charity space, that's going to add to your achievement threshold of reaching whatever fundraising goal or metric that you were trying to reach. So I want to talk now about this particular woman. Her name is Danielle Walker, and she wrote a book called Against All Grain. And against all grain there's a diet phenomenon now called paleo, which is this idea of not really eating bread. You do see a piece of bread, a loaf of bread in her picture, but that's a bread that you make out of cashew butter. And she writes all these recipes about how you can eat a lifestyle that's really closer to the way that caveman or Paleolithic man lived. Very few carbs. And she's a really fascinating digital marketing success. So she wrote this cookbook, And she was looking to attract people to this content. And so what she did was, which was very smart, she shared it on a lot of different channels. So you can go to her Instagram page and you can see she's constantly taking pictures of the things that she's making. She's getting ready to sell a new book. And so she's been, talking about those recipes and talking about preparing those recipes. She's also pregnant with her second child. So she's sort of shared that journey with everybody. One of the reasons that she was first inspired to write this book was that she had an autoimmune disease, and she found that she could handle it much, much better if she ate, if she stayed away from carbs and processed foods. So she's really brought people in with her story, and she attracts people to her website and to her different Facebook and Twitter channels. And then you can see circled in the red circle there is that she allows you to sign up for free recipes by email. So you can really, she stays in touch with her audience on a daily basis because she's constantly in front of them by attracting them to come back to her website or to follow her on these different social media channels by sending them these recipes. And then she also looks for different ways to engage or connect with her audiences. Remember, you're trying to spark and sustain a conversation. And that's what she's doing here. She's sending an email about a recipe. The person may make the recipe and never talk about it. However, the reason that I first found her was that one of my friends made a recipe from her cookbook, took a picture of it, put it on Instagram, and it looked really delicious and it sounded really interesting. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm going to buy the book because I really do think that I would like to try some of these recipes and see if eating this way makes me feel better, because that's what she promises. You see right here, delectable paleo recipes to eat and feel great. And here you can see that she has 309,000 followers on Facebook. So she's doing really, really well in terms of developing a community of people that are really interested in what she has to offer. And then here she is on Twitter. She also has, thousands of followers on Twitter, and people are very interested in talking to her. And what's amazing about her is that she talks back to them. You really can get her attention. It's not like a celebrity where she's just interested in posting things and then she doesn't respond back. She really does talk to her community and address people's concerns. And here's the Drive Profitable Action. So she wrote this cookbook. It's a very successful cookbook on Amazon. She got a deal to write another cookbook, which means that she was very successful. And what's also really interesting about her is that she's partnered with other food manufacturing companies to make some of these ingredients that she talks about. So she's really found a way to build an entire company, and not almost exclusively through social media, but that's really how she built a major following and put that book really on the top of the charts by developing this community and by talking to people and having these consistent conversations with them. So let's talk about some of the goals that you should have. And this is what I talked about at the beginning when I said when you go back to your offices and you talk about these ideas with your colleagues and you plan them out for yourself. The first thing you want to do is you want to look for opportunities to connect. You want to have these important conversations. You want to remind people to keep talking to you and about you. And you want to use tools that can help you organize these efforts within your organizations. And we're going to go through each of these now, but I did want to give sort of a summary up to date of all the things we've talked about. So let's talk about having a conversation. And when I talk about content, which is, all the stuff that you put out there in the digital space, so text, articles, video, all of those types of things, I always say content is a conversation. It's a conversation in a marketplace. And in every marketplace, there's a buyer and there's a seller. And in every healthy conversation, we really need to answer 5 questions. The first is, to whom are you talking? The second is, who are you? The third is, what are you trying to say? The fourth is, how do you say it, or the voice and tone that you use to say it? And then when and where do you say it? And so this is really the questions that you need to go back and think about really carefully when you're planning your digital media strategy or your social media strategy. Who are the people that you're trying to talk to? Who are your target audiences? We're going to talk in depth about how to create a tool that will help you get to that. And then who are you? What does your brand represent to them? So Danielle Walker's brand represents the promise of making and eating delicious food that is healthy and nutritious, and that might, for some people who are very sensitive to gluten or to carbs, might really help you feel better. What are you trying to say? So what are the different types of content that you're trying to produce, and what are you trying to say with each of these pieces of content and in this conversation? And then how do you say it? What is the voice and tone that you use to say it? Are you a chatty organization, an academic organization, a formal organization, a cool hipster organization? What do people think? What is the brand personality that they expect to encounter when they talk to you? And then when and where do you say it? So like any conversation, some are appropriate to have at some times and some are inappropriate to have at other times. And in every good, healthy conversation, there's give and take. You're not always talking about yourself and your products and your services, but you're focusing on your audiences and you're trying to find out what they need and what they want. You're using you more than I. And so these are all questions that you really should go back and think through if you haven't already. What are the detailed answers to each of these? So now let's talk about content creation basics, how you decide who your audience is. So the first thing you need to do is you need to figure out who they are, what they care about, what their pain points are. You want to map their journey so you can help understand what they're thinking about in terms of their buying cycle, and then you want to give them answers. So let's go through the who are they. So this is a tool called a persona, and it's a really helpful tool that you should try to create within your organizations, because it will help you narrow down exactly who these people are that you're trying to reach. And what you should do is you should get in a conference room, or you should sit down. And I like to do this workshop with magazines and have people cut out pictures and talk about these people. But you really want to give them names, ages, how much money they make, what their education level is, where they live, how they access information about your products and services. Really breathe life into these people. Make them fully realized creatures. It will so help you create better content and better conversations for them if you have real people to think about, rather than just, saying, okay, well, our first target audience is working mothers in their late 30s, and our second target audience is, men in their 60s. That doesn't work. You really want to create, a woman named Stacy who has 2 kids and works, as a bank manager and makes, $62,000 a year and lives in, Seattle, Washington, and has a husband named Dan. I mean, that is really going to help you when you're starting to try to have a conversation with Stacy, have a much more detailed, robust conversation with her than just saying, okay, we're talking to working moms who are in their 30s. Then, in order to fill in that kind of information about who these people are, you want to do customer research, and a lot of that is available on the web, although you may want to think about doing some customer research for your specific products and services. You certainly can use interactive data, so looking at analytics from a lot of different points, not just your website analytics, but all kinds of different interactive data about how people are interacting with you. Ethnographic studies are really helpful. So I've done research where I've actually gone out and watched people in the field to see how they interact with different things. I started my career as a medical writer, and I used to talk to patients in waiting rooms just to get a sense of the kinds of content that they wanted to read about on hospital websites. And also, really importantly, listen on social media. And don't just listen to what people are saying about you. Listen to what people are saying about your competitors and within your marketplace. You can get a lot of good ideas about what people want to hear about if you open up your ears and sort of eavesdrop, quote unquote, on conversations that are going on. And so then you also want to really think about what people's pain points are. What's difficult for them? What really makes them buy? What makes them sell? What makes them think, I don't really want to interact with this company anymore? What makes them think this company is going to answer my problems? Because if you can address those specific pain points in your content, you really will be able to have much more successful, exciting conversations with people over social media and over different distribution vehicles than you will if you just sort of like think about, okay, well, Stacy's this working mother and we can't really help her figure out what her problems are because, we haven't really thought through what they are. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to map a journey. And a flowchart is very helpful for this. But think about what is the buying process looks like. So this was a map that I drew for a particular website that sells appliances. So we talked about they needed a fridge, then they knew that they wanted an ice maker, so they were able to use this appliance sorter to figure out which brands had the ice maker, had the fridge that had the ice maker. Then they found 3 items that were in their price range. They were able to compare them and look further. Another way to map a journey is to tie the journey to real content. So one of the ways that you do that is you think about what are the motivations that people have when they're looking for your content. What's the primary content that they look at? What's the secondary content that they look at? And then what will their actions be? And you can see that from the primary content and the secondary content, you can really see if you have content already existing on your website or on other places on the web that are going to answer these questions. If you don't, right away you know that there's a hole and you need to create some information to be able to have that conversation and answer those questions that your target audiences so desperately need those answers to. And then, like I said, give them answers. So the most important thing that I can tell you is that you want to give people value. There's a very famous digital marketing expert named Marcus Sheridan, and he says that if you want to start a blog, you should make a list of the top 100 things that your customers ask you on a regular basis and just blog about each of those things. And I think that it's important to look at those top 100 things and make sure that you have content, if you don't have a blog, somewhere on your website that answers the questions that people have about your products and services, because you're not providing value to people if you're not answering their questions. If you really want to spark and sustain those conversations that lead towards strategic online marketing, you need to provide value to people and you need to answer the things that they care about, not just talk about yourself and what your products and services can do for them. Now let's talk about establishing internal workflow. And I show this slide and I usually get a big laugh from the audience when I do, because you can see that if people don't think through a problem, sometimes it creates a bigger one. And so you see that this pencil started off saying too cool to do drugs, but as it got sharpened, it changed the message to a point that really wasn't exactly what the point of the entire pencil creation project was about. So you really want to be careful when you're thinking about how to spark and sustain these conversations for your audiences by thinking about what your workflow is going to be for how you're going to get these conversations out there. Content lives at the intersection of people, process, and technology, and this is why it's so complicated for most organizations. When I present this, in groups of hundreds of people, I have people raise their hand and I say to them, how many people have technology stayed the same in your organization over the last 12 months? How many people have process stayed the same? And how many people have your talent stayed the same over the last 12 months? Nobody ever raises their hand, because in today's day and age, these 3 circles are constantly spinning and moving, which means that their intersection is also constantly spinning and moving. So it's really important for you to remember that workflow is challenging for everybody, and the reason that it is because it's made up of these 3 things. So you need to figure out the technology and the systems that you're using in your companies and organizations. You need to figure out the process for how you're going to manage digital marketing, and you also need to figure out who are the right people within our organization that's going to be able to handle this tremendous task. And so what you really want to do is you want to answer these questions about internal workflow. Who are the people responsible for all the different phases of a content lifecycle? And you can see on the right that graphic represents all of the different phases that I believe that you need to create robust, extraordinary content. Governance is in the middle, and governance is the idea of keeping your content consistent and sustained no matter what channel people find you on. And the reason that I put it in the middle is that if it's not applied to every single part of the content lifecycle, it doesn't stay consistent. And so you want to think about who are the people that plan, create, publish, distribute on social media or on other places on the web, analyze or measure, and govern your content. And this is all really, really critical, because as we talked about earlier, if you don't think about answering people's questions and then how to create content that's really going to spark and sustain these conversations, how to publish and get it out there in the real world, how to distribute it, how's it going to be sort of megaphoned out there or published out there in a way that people are really going to see it, and then how are you going to analyze or measure back to that return on investment? How are you going to make sure that you're hitting those key performance indicators that are going to prove that you're getting something out of doing all these activities? then you're not really servicing yourselves or your organizations well if you're not deciding from the very beginning what the goals of all these different activities are going to be. And so one of the reasons that people come to me and they say, why is workflow so hard, and why is it so difficult to produce great content? Why is it so difficult to get it out there? These reasons have to do with information flow. So you want to think about, how is information going back and forth in your organization? Those stories that are sort of buried, are they getting out to the right people? Do you have an editorial team who's really on the lookout for great stories about your organization? Maybe you're only one or two people and you don't have enough people to sort of take care of this work for you. Misplaced talent in a lot of organizations. Writers are performing as editors, or editors are performing as writers, or graphic designers are writing, and so you really need to make sure that you have the right people in the right roles. There's lack of guidance and clear models. There's no strategy, so people just don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And then there's lack of training. They really don't know enough about social media or about content or about online marketing in general to make good, smart decisions. And so thinking about, if you're having any of these issues in your organization, what the right solutions for your size organization and for you will help you sort of eliminate some of these challenges. The most important thing that I can tell you is you really want to focus on the roles for creating great content and for getting out there on social media, not the people and not the talent. So let's go into this a little bit further, because sometimes people have a hard time understanding what I mean. This is a cycle that shows how content gets developed. And if you remember that other graphic that I showed earlier, it sort of mimics this idea. Somebody has to request that the content gets created, so in that top green circle. Then somebody has to provide the information. Somebody has to go ahead and create that content. Somebody has to review it, right, to make sure that it's appropriate and editorial sound and spelled right and grammar and tone and all that stuff. Somebody then has to approve it. So if you're in a legal organization or you're in a regulated industry, you need to make sure that putting this out there isn't going to open you up to anything litigious. And then somebody has to publish it and get it out there. And so there has to be a person assigned to each of these roles every single time. And if you don't have a person assigned to these roles every single time, unfortunately, a lot of the times you're scrambling to figure out who's going to do all these roles while you're trying to get this piece of content or this piece of social media content out there. And then it's like just frustrating for everybody, and everybody feels nervous and tense, and it just leads to a lot of problems. So one of the first things that I tell organizations is look at this chart and figure out who this person or people are. It might be one person that does all these roles, although that would be really, really unusual. But whoever it's going to be, make sure that these people are trained and understand what their role is in the content lifecycle so that they can do it. So if an attorney gets on his desk something that has to go out on social media, he understands this is a big priority for the organization, because if it doesn't get out there in a timely fashion, they're going to lose whatever effect that they might have had when they release this piece of information. Same thing with the person who's providing the information. They need to know that they need to get this information to the people who are creating the content so that the content can actually get created. And I think a lot of times solving these problems within your organization by assigning these roles to people and clearly explaining to them how they play a part in this process really will help you eliminate, again, some of the challenges around digital marketing strategy. And this is another way to map out how something is going to be created, like a simple flow chart. So what I need you to do as soon as you can in terms of eliminating this challenge is map your current workflow. So figure out how you're managing this at all. Write up and use current job descriptions that just explain briefly in a couple of bullets what people do. Rearrange the workflow to be appropriate for the end content product. So if you have somebody who's super talented at taking pictures, make sure that that person is the person who's responsible for the social media channels of Instagram and, let's say, Facebook, rather than somebody who's a really excellent writer. Make that person responsible for the blog. Rewrite those job descriptions if that's appropriate. Examine who is in those roles. And then the last thing to do is to use an editorial calendar. That's a tool that can be really helpful for you in terms of determining how often you're going to be publishing content, which channels you're going to use when you do that, and what kinds of content you're going to use and how often you're going to use them. Again, in answering those questions of when and where are you saying it, we look at these channels and it's really complicated. So I'm just going to go through them. Twitter is the kind of channel that's really good for talking to people and also for broadcasting content by giving people a link. YouTube is obviously where you want to put video. Facebook is a place where you could really sort of do a lot of different things because it supports a lot of different links and a lot of different types of content. LinkedIn is really a B2B community, so that's business to business as opposed to B2C, business to consumer. And I think you really sort of want to spend your time in groups and talking to colleagues and networking. Think of LinkedIn almost like a business conference. Pinterest is the place where you can sort of pin boards and things like that, and that's definitely a place for visual content. Tumblr is also a really great place to post like one-off blogs. You don't need to put a lot of information there, so that's another social media channel. Flickr is a visual content. That green button is a share it widget, and that you can use a lot of different social media channels. When you click on that, it sort of opens up into a big menu where you can choose where to share that content. And then the RSS feed, which seems to be going away for a lot of things, although I don't think it should, is a way for people to receive your content depending on how they sign up for it and depending on which reader systems they're using to get your content. So these are a lot of the different channels that you can use for social media, and I think that I wanted to add in Tumblr just to make sure it got covered because I talked about it earlier. But I think that these are the ones that you want to think about using when you're starting out, thinking about how you're really going to be focusing your social media efforts. So in summary, we talked about the goals of online marketing, and we talked about how really it's your job to sell the promise of a sustained conversation, how to write relevant and compelling content for your audience, ask yourself the top 100 questions, think about who these people are, use research to develop full personas, breathe life into them, make them real people, and then figure out how to answer their pain points. And then develop internal workflow for content creation. Figure out who the right people are for each of those different roles and make sure that those people are in charge of that work. I always end any sort of content marketing or digital marketing conversation. Who said getting an audience is hard, sustaining an audience is hard. It demands a consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. So everybody thinks I'm going to say some like famous digital marketer, but actually it's Bruce Springsteen, who's of course a very famous American rock star. And so just knowing that somebody like him, who's had an incredibly long and robust career, understands that creating and sustaining an audience requires a lot of work, I think should be inspiring for all of us who are really trying to figure out this whole thing out in the online marketing space. If you are interested, you can purchase my book, The Digital Crown, Winning at Content on the Web. I talk about a lot of the concepts I talked about here today, but even more in depth. You can find this on Amazon.com. I appreciate your time today. You can certainly email me or tweet or Facebook me with any questions that you may have on simplifying your online marketing. Thank you very much. I'm Ahava Leibtag. Have a great day.